Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Fret Success Guitar Show. It's been a little bit of a while since I've done one of these episodes, and actually this interview today has been in the works for quite some time when we've managed to pin the chap down, so I'm excited to get and dive into that conversation. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing, all that sort of stuff, and the podcast just to hang around and listen and save that and follow that stuff. And I'd love to see people in the comments or just help this kind of channel grow. It's been great to see everyone chipping in and joining in and adding their contributions to the community that's kind of building around the channel, which is great. Today's guest is a passionate guitar player, I think, originally, and he also happens to work for the G7th Company, which, if you've not heard of that, I heard of it a few years ago, and they make quite high-end level capos or capos. We'll maybe get into that conversation later, but they're a leading capo company, and they make it for all sorts of instruments, not just the guitar. And his love for music and guitar playing kind of led him to explore different worlds. He started off as a teacher in a kind of rock school, and we'll find out more about his early days, and got into more of the product kind of artist customer relations and social media at the G7th Capo. So we met a little while ago, and he decided to join that company and team that creates these high quality capos. He sent me a few a while back now that I've tested out and will give away as part of this process, so you'll find out how to do that later on. But it's great. The capos are great. Honestly, I don't talk shit on this channel, and the capos are they keep the guitar nicely in tune, easily applied. I've used a wide variety of them before, and I just wanted to get this chap on to talk about it. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Tommy Luce to the show so we can have a chat about him and the company and what they're doing. So, hey Tommy, how's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks, Dan. How you doing?
I'm good, actually, yeah. So, how you been through the whole, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but the whole COVID saga and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, still here, still chipping away, doing whatever it is we do. But yeah, thank you so much for your patience. We've sort of ping-ponged back over the last probably couple of years or so, haven't we, getting this together? So thank you very much for your patience. It's nice to come and chat to you. Been looking forward to it.
You must talk to so many different artists and people in the industry. And how do you think everything is around the whole COVID thing and people coming back to live performance? What are your observations at the moment?
I haven't seen the word cancelled or postponed in relation to COVID for a long time, which is really nice. I have seen it quite a lot in terms of cost of living and stuff like that, which is, we can't pretend that's not a thing. But yeah, COVID-wise, I mean, I've been to quite a few gigs over the last probably 12 months or so. I've not had to do a test to go in anywhere. I would do if I needed to, obviously, but it seems like it's gotten to a point now where a lot of things have realigned and gotten somewhat back to normal. For NAMM, we're over there next month, where it would normally be in January, and next year it'll be back in January again. So it's kind of been staggered steadily back to where it would have been. So it would have taken 4 years to do. But at least there's still a show. At least there are still gigs. I used to get sent 20, 30 things a day to share. And then when it got to COVID, it went to 200 or 300 because everyone was suddenly streaming. Everyone was doing everything they possibly could. And then it gradually kind of petered out. And I think people have found a bit more of a sustainable level of whatever they're doing now. So I think hopefully we all learn something with whatever we do, and maybe found a bit of a better balance in the process. But it was tricky without having a rule book, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Everything kind of flipped, and quite quickly I thought that the fact that artists straight away were on that kind of live feed stuff, how can we still reach our audience and our fans? And I thought it was great that everyone was supporting people even though they couldn't go anywhere. I was doing a couple of things online just off a whim, just on Facebook, and then people were sending even me stuff for doing that and entertaining them in their homes, and it was just that kind of sense of camaraderie and the fans kind of pulling together to realise that artists still needed supporting. They had no way of making an income. Like, even though a lot of bands and artists make money through merch now, people were still not really, they've flipped to more buying the merch without going to the shows, which is interesting. And now it's kind of quickly I've noticed, just flipped back, and people are out on the kind of touring front again to try and get the crowds going again. So
absolutely, yeah, it's nice to see it all happening, isn't it? And I think I went to see, probably 2 or 3 months ago now, I went to see an artist called Sierra Hull in London. And it was a lovely venue. It was called King's Place, just away from King's Cross in London. And it was almost completely full. And it was just so lovely to go to something. And you felt very safe. People were being sensible. And it just felt like it always felt, really. And I think that's possibly the first gig I went to that it felt like that. It just felt, normal's maybe a bit of a stretch, whatever normal looks like on a good day. But it was really nice. And I came out of the gig, And I realized that for 3 hours, I hadn't really thought about anything extra. I didn't need to in that
Mhm.
sense. I'm still respectful and polite and everything and, hygienic and all that stuff. But yeah, it really kind of felt like it was slotting back in. And this is the first year I think it's felt like that.
So getting back to you, Tommy, like how did you kind of start with guitar in general? What's your kind of foundations? Was there a moment where you thought, I've got to do this? Like maybe.
Sure, yeah. There was a very specific moment. But yeah, so when I was about 4 or 5, I tinkered around on the piano a little bit because my mum's a pianist. And I started playing somewhat properly when I was about 7. I did 3 or 4 of the grades and I wasn't particularly good. But I don't think that was all the piano's fault. It was mostly me not practicing, I think. And then when I was 12, I was at secondary school and I thought, well, I want to play another instrument. I didn't know what. And I was about the same kind of build when I was 12 as I am now, just a bit more scaled down. And they had a tuba and no one to play it. And I think they looked at me and thought, well, he looks gullible, doesn't need any mates, we'll give him a tuba. And so I started playing the tuba. And so that was an interesting one. That got me into a lot of situations I wouldn't have been in, concert bands, brass bands, even jazz and big bands and that kind of stuff. And then when I was 13, I found a plectrum on the playground at school. And so I picked it up and pretended I could play it. And I think I was on the school bus on the way home, just sort of pretending that I could do something with it. And one of the girls just sort of said, oh, you play guitar, do you? Oh, yeah. Oh, do I? Can I hear you? Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I thought, oh, I better learn how to play it now. And then I went home and do you remember Woolworths that we used to have
Yep.
here? Yeah, obviously, yeah. It was still in the days of Woolworths. So this is going back to 2000 when they had the bargain bin of CDs, and you'd have the top 30, top 40, wouldn't you? And then when they couldn't be bothered to keep those up there anymore, they'd sling them all in a bargain bin for £1. And my brother bought a single of The Wicker Man by Iron Maiden. They'd released it a few months earlier. And he played me that. And I'd never heard anything like that before. And there was a 3-track CD. And I heard that. And I was just it was genuinely a light bulb moment. And I thought, well, that's it then, isn't it? And my dad had been a guitar teacher and player for probably 30 years by this point, classical guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we had. So I learned how to do a bit of that. And I didn't want to learn chords. I didn't want to learn finger style. I wanted to learn The Wicker Man, obviously. But persevered with it. And then they got us our first electric and an amp and a little effects box for Christmas that year. And then started playing in bands, going to gigs, all of that kind of stuff. And my uncle was a record dealer. And so he had everything by everyone. And my cousins were about 3 or 4 years older than me. So we'd go and stay there in the summer and they'd play us Aerosmith, Metallica, Pantera, Slayer, everything really. And then the Cradle of Filth type stuff, the Blink-182 type stuff kind of came either side of it, I suppose. Very different kind of, I never thought in terms of subgenres back then. I just thought, well, or it's punk or it's metal. I didn't sort of think, well, it's underground, black, white, death, thrash, core, speed, thug, whatever. I just thought, oh, I like that. There's guitar in it, And my dad was a big Stefan Grappelli fan and Django Reinhardt fan, so I heard lots of gypsy jazz growing up as well, not knowing what any of it was, and gradually appreciating it for what it was. And then, so yeah, when I was 13, that was the light bulb moment. And we formed the first band within a year and a half or so. Started going to pub gigs, started going to bigger gigs and things like that about 20 years ago. And back then it was all MySpace, obviously, rather than Spotify or Facebook or anything like that. And then we've gradually seen all of these changes, haven't we, with all of the smaller ones as well, like the Bebos and the, what do you call it, Pure Volumes and all of those other websites, Reverb Nation and stuff like that. So it's interesting to see it all develop. So yeah, that was how it all started for me, really. And I veered into other things with guitar as well. I've got the harp guitar on the back wall there.
Okay, yep.
Which I started in, I think that was about 2009, after seeing Andy McKee play one on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was at uni, I thought, oh, I wouldn't mind getting one of them. I'll see if there's a cheap one online. And there was a guy in Aberdeen selling one. And it had been on Gumtree for about 3 years, I think. So he started it at some silly price and it just came down £100 every month. And eventually I bought it for, I don't know what it was, £500 or something, and learned a bit on that. And then my daughter would have been about 4 at the time, I think. And I can remember opening the case and she went, play us something then, Dad. And I thought, Mm. It's that moment with the plectrum again all over. So yeah, very much an arranging tool, you know. So yeah, that's kind of my heritage in a nutshell, I suppose. Quite a big nutshell, actually, wasn't it?
No, it's interesting. And then you touched on a few things that I'd like to talk about, but the one
Mm.
thing I guess is we're a similar age, and the transformation of really the music industry and the way music's consumed, and even the guitar market itself. Like, I think it's huge. Like the fact we're talking about things like MySpace, like that
Yeah.
were so prevalent at the time that don't exist anymore, really. And it's crazy now that it's a completely different world, and really, it's not really a big space in time that happened. And compare it to that from like the 60s or earlier, where you had vinyl for a long time, and then tape kind of crept in, and then all of a sudden this wealth of information and digitization of everything just is crazy when you think about it. Like, and the fact that the guitar is now going that way with the Kemper stuff and the modeling type stuff, that's becoming just as good as the real thing in some people's minds. And do you reflect on any of that stuff and sort of see where we are now? And
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I think with all of the Kemper side of things, my brother runs a studio. He's the vocalist and the other guitar player in the band I play in. We've been in the band together for 22 years, I think now. So I've kind of had a front row seat to what he does, and vice versa. And he bought a Kemper a few years ago because he gets a lot of guys come into his studio who want to sound like Meshuggah, and they've got a 15 quid Squire 10 watt amp. Not wrong with them, they're fine, they're great to learn with,
yeah,
but you're not going to sound like Dimebag, are you? And
no.
so he just plugs them into that, and it sounds as close as they'll get. And he actually lent it to me for a week a couple of years ago. And I'm a bit thick with this stuff, really. I've got the same amp there that I've had for. I think I got that when I was 22 years. I think I've had that now. I sold it maybe 10 years ago and messed around with a few messes and stuff like that, and then sold them both and ended up buying the same thing back again. So I'm very much a simpleton with amps, and I borrowed this Kemper off him, and it was amazing. But after a week, I gave it back to him, and he said, "So what do you reckon then?" And I said, "I found a really good clean and a really good distortion and a really good in between." And he says, "Is that it?" I said, "Yeah, I basically used it like my amp. It was a great bit of kit, but it's lost on me. Like, it's far too complicated for what I need, and I don't really have the patience to sit down and get a degree in all of that stuff. I think I'm not. It's not that I'm not curious, but I think the older I've gotten, I mean, I'm 36 now, and the older I get, the more I'm interested in actually playing again and not worrying
Mhm.
as much about the gear, I suppose. I like gear, and gear's fun, but I know what I'm like. I'm very obsessive, and I think if I delve too deep into one of them, if I bought an Axe Effects, I wouldn't leave the house for 3 months. You know what I mean? So yeah, well, I would here and there, but so yeah, and I think in terms of everything else changing, having a 15-year-old as I do now, they're at the point where they're coming to gigs as well. I'm taking them to see Guns N' Roses in a few months, and it's the first really big gig they've ever been to. And I have some old, gig flyers, gig photos, physical ones. Before we had digital, but you have the
Yeah,
disposable,
yeah.
didn't you? And get them developed for £2 and get a free film from Boots with it or whatever it was. And I was looking through a bunch of them the other day, and I had flyers that we used to give out, and I looked at some of them, and I thought we actually used to give people flyers, thinking, oh, they'll probably keep hold of them, they won't go straight in the bin. And I can remember going to gigs in London, whoever you were waiting to see, you'd be at the Astoria or something, and people would come along and fly, wouldn't they? And they'd give you
Hmm.
stuff, these club nights and all of that, and you just put it straight in the bin or chuck it on the floor. And but yeah, I suppose the way it's all done now. I was talking to someone about MySpace the other day, and I'd completely forgotten that you had, was it the top 8 or the top 16, wasn't it? I think you had on there,
Yeah.
and you'd keep an eye on it, wouldn't you? And if you
Hmm.
suddenly from someone's top 16, you think, well, I'll take them out of mine then. If they're going to play dirty like that, don't even want to speak to them, even though it's my girlfriend. So yeah, it was a very strange time, but maybe it wasn't. But it seems strange to think about how much it's all changed now, doesn't it? And in terms of the Spotify thing, I think it has some definite pros and cons, And I hear an awful lot of, in my opinion, inaccurate info about it, though. I think a lot of people see these stats online and just chuck them around. Oh well, the Who only make £8 a month from Spotify, do they? Yeah, that's fact checked. I imagine that. So it's an interesting one, and I think you have to just take all of it with a pinch, don't you? And obviously you've got the invention of TikTok and stuff like that. that's a chasm, isn't it? I mean, I started that for G7th a couple of years ago. Didn't do too much with it for a little while. We had 100, 150 people, and then we had a couple of accidental bits of good luck on there, and we ended up being on 8 or 9,000 within a couple of days. It was really bizarre how it happened. But then, of course, you think, right, what do I do now? How do we do that again? And I'd never want to be one of these, looking over my shoulder type people. But the more time that goes on, you look at whatever it is on your phone, you think, oh, I was talking about that earlier on, or this artist, or this, and all of these things just kind of seem to cross over. And I even had one earlier on when I was thinking about something very, very specific a couple of hours before, and it popped up on my phone when I was watching an Eddie Van Halen interview. And I just thought, I'm not sure I like all this. I have to sort of give myself concentrated downtime from it because I spend so much time on Instagram every day and Facebook and TikTok for the G7th gig. It can send you a bit round the twist, I think, if you're not careful with all of that stuff. So yeah, I think it's bizarre to look back on how much it's all changed. And I still have cassettes and mini discs, and I can remember listening to them, and I was perfectly happy. But now I have the whole of Spotify at my fingertips, and I never want to listen to any of it because there's too much choice, isn't there? So we're never satisfied.
It is. It's just this kind of chain that just keeps building and building, and almost like a snowball. But I do like the convenience of things like Spotify and stuff, and then you can just directly share things to your friends and stuff like that. But it's different. Like, people that now grow up with that since that system, and not the other ones that were there previous. Like, it just becomes normal. But I don't know. Start to sound like an old man, I guess. But it's definitely, I don't know. I think it's good in a way, but definitely just as long as it's still serving the artist. I know, you alluded to some of that in what you said, and it's interesting that, I mean, they wouldn't do it otherwise. And I think the mass market appeal and kind of way that they can be shared and promoted on the platform and then recommended to other people. I doubt anyone doesn't know who is, but definitely on other smaller bands I've found recently where I'll be playing an album through a certain band that I like, and then it will start playing similar bands, and I'll be like, nah, oh, that's good. Like, what's that? And I'll like it, and then I'll go back and dig into the album. So there is that nice kind of algorithm, but I do know what you mean, where it's like, I have the same thing where I'm talking about buying a new garden spade or something, and then that evening I've got adverts for garden spades. I'm like, I didn't type anything in. What the hell's going on here? So it's quite interesting that the way that is. But getting back to the guitar for you, like, what has that been like since you kind of picked up and you were in bands, and that last kind of 20-year period since then? What's been the progression for you, and how have you been in the guitar industry?
So when I first started, it was very much classical guitar, because that was what we had around the house. And I did actually do some classical guitar. I think I did my grade 5 when I was about 15 or something. So I did make a proper concerted effort. And obviously, as with everything, you're maybe a bit stubborn when you're that age and you think you know everything. And I didn't think I knew everything, but I think I thought I knew more than I did. And I use the technique all the time now. So obviously, I'm really glad that I learned it. So thanks, Mum and Dad, and Dad for the hours that he spent with me trying to, proper rest stroke technique and all this. And I think then, when I got into bands, I got very, very obsessed with listening to everything that Maiden had done up until that point, and then thinking, right, what bands inspired them, and then going back and listening to a whole bunch of that stuff, and then gradually working my way back. So I think through that, finding bands like Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, Jimi Hendrix, Cream, and I suppose even stuff like Golden Earring and Montrose and things like that. Steve Harris from Iron Maiden said they influenced him, and Yes, and bands like that, and Rush. And I thought, I better listen to a bit of them. And some of it I quite liked, and some of it I didn't really get. And then I remember buying a Jethro Tull album because he said he really liked Jethro Tull, and I thought, I don't know what this is, but I think I quite like it. And then years later, I think Jethro Tull won Best Metal Album of the Year or something over Metallica, and I thought, oh, it's quite a serious artist then. Like, I really had appreciated how important they were. And so for me, I think when I got to 2007, I started working in a guitar shop in the town where I lived, and a little before that was when YouTube came into existence. And then I think at one point Andy McKee had 3 of the top 5 videos of any videos at all there. So I watched that for hours and hours every day. I'd never seen anyone play like that, really. I thought with a a steel string acoustic. You just kind of strummed it and accompanied.
Mm.
Was doing stuff with different tunings and capos and everything, and I never had a clue about any of that. So I got more into that and then started playing around with pickups. And of course, when you work in a guitar shop, you've got access to things that you perhaps wouldn't have. So that was cool. Started doing open mic nights, and then I went off to uni, did my degree at Coventry Uni when I was 22 in 2009, found the harp guitar. And when I finished my degree, the last project that I did was a gypsy jazz quartet. And it was really good fun. And my dad played the violin. So it was kind of us doing this stuff together that I'd grown up on 15 years before, which was really lovely. I enjoyed that a lot. In terms of where I went from there, that kind of morphs into how I started with G7th. So this would have been about 2016. I was working for Rock School, the exam board, and I started doing the long tours. And the first one I did was Hong Kong and Vietnam for 7 weeks. And I'd never been away from home for 7 weeks in one go. And I thought, never been to Hong Kong or Vietnam. This will be quite an experience. And it was amazing. And I'd been looking around at travel guitars, but I didn't want one that was just a small guitar. I didn't want a 3/4 size wee Loudon or anything. I wanted something I could fold up, but would still be half decent. And I came across Journey guitars, and I got chatting to the guys at Journey, and they said, oh, well, at that time they didn't have anyone distributing to the UK, but they said, we do have someone that stocks them in Hong Kong, maybe go and try one. And as it happens, I was examining in the music shop that sold the guitars, and I thought, oh, okay. And that happened to be on Black Friday as well. So all the planets aligned, and I thought, I better get one of these then. So I got one of them, and I've had it ever since. It's been on dozens of flights with me. It's great. It's called the Overhead series, and it goes into your overhead bin. And so it's hand luggage sized, and it's great. I've taken it all over the world, and it meant I could keep playing while I was on the road. And then I started going to the harp guitar gathering, which is just as geeky as it sounds. It's about 60 of us from all over the world who can't decide which anorak to bring with us. And we congregate at different places in the States every year. I've not been since 2019, but I should be going this year. And I was a featured artist there in 2018 in Connecticut. And so it's, looking back on it from this point, looking back to the beginning, it's been really nice to see where I started, with the classical guitar stuff, and then growing up on the gypsy stuff and not really knowing what it was. And my brother and I are recording a gypsy jazz album at the moment for a sync, submission thingy. And we're doing some more on that tomorrow. So it's been nice to sort of get back into that style again. And obviously with working with G7th, when I was I was in Portland in 2018, and NAMM is a few hours flight away, obviously in California. And Journey said, oh, well, we'll get you a badge, pop over and demo on the booth if you want. So I did, and it was great fun. I'd never been to NAMM before, and I've been to UK shows, but they're a grain of sand compared to the beach that is NAMM. Obviously, they're 100 booths maybe, and NAMM's 20,000, and which is quite a lot bigger. And I can remember at the time I was doing quite a lot with a group on Facebook that I run. I still run it, but I don't do quite as much in it now, called Fingerstyle Hub. And it's quite a big group. There's 24,000 or so, but obviously, as we know, numbers aren't always reflective of how much Facebook lets anyone see or anything like that. But it's nice. It's become quite a self-run community. And I was doing interviews with people for Fingerstyle Hub. So I was jetting around talking to different companies, and I came across G7th. And I knew of G7th because when I worked in retail 12 years before, we'd sold their early capos, and I'd used them on and off. And so I certainly knew of them. And I didn't realize that they were based 20 minutes down the road from me here in the UK. So we stayed in touch, and did a little an interview about their new model at the time, which was this one, the Performance 3.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got back to the UK, I went over, we had pizza, we had coffee, we had a chat about some giveaways we might be able to do through Fingerstyle Hub. And just as I was leaving, Nick, who invented G7th, just said, by the way, if you know of anybody who might want to join the team, we're looking for someone to do this, this, and this. And at the time, I was busy with the Rock School examining, with gigs, with lessons. I lectured at the uni that I went to for 6 years after I left. So I didn't think of myself at all at first. I thought, well, I wouldn't have time. And then gradually, the more I thought about it, I thought, well, actually, it would be more consistent. I wouldn't be going away for 4 or 5 months every year. And there was one particular day I was doing some Rock School exams. I don't remember where it was, somewhere down south. and they had a bit of a habit of changing the start time, but at 11 o'clock the night before. And so I just happened to look at it, and it moved forward an hour, and I thought, that's perfect. And I got there, nowhere to park, obviously, busy city centre. And I got there to do a whole day of drum exams, and there was no drum kit. And I was thinking, perhaps I'll call Nick, actually, and and see if he still wants someone to do that job. And yeah, started working for him about 4 days later, I think. And then the world. So yeah, it was a. So all the other stuff went away anyway. Like all the rock school stuff stopped, or a lot of it did. All the uni stuff stopped. A lot of the lessons stopped. So it was a very fortunate timing, really. But yeah, and of course now I spend all day, every day, talking to other guitar players and learning the idiosyncrasies that we all have, and how much the tiny things matter, and how little some people care about things, gear wise. And yeah, it's a real. It's like a blizzard of just of strings and things, I suppose. It's an interesting one, and every day is very different. But yeah, some of the people that you get to speak to and meet, it's a lot of fun. No 2 days are the same, and some days you finish it thinking, that was great. I've been trying to get to that person for 2 years. Brilliant. And then sometimes you answer 50 emails, and of course 48 of them have replied by the time you've finished the 50th one, and you think, oh blimey, I still need to ask them all another thing. So yeah, it's varied. But yeah, as I look back on everything guitar playing wise over the last 20 odd years, I've been really fortunate to do what I have done, and play in different parts of the world, and rub shoulders with different people. And yeah, I try and pass it on to people now as much as I can, because I think you should do that. Try to help the next generation and all that.
No, it's great. I think it's important to give back to the guitar playing community, especially as you get a few years under your belt. And do you like peruse the forums and stuff then, or are you just kind of like through your work you find that you're giving enough back?
Yeah, I spend quite a bit of times going into the things like acoustic guitar forum and stuff like that. I'm not, as I said earlier on, I'm not a massive gearhead, so I don't sort of think, right, let's see what's going on in pedals today, and just sort of spend 8 hours perusing pedals. But because of if there's an issue with a capo, or if there's a particular model that people are asking questions about, or someone wants to know something that people will quite often do is they'll tag me on Facebook, or they'll send me an email and say, oh, this person's been asking about this. So I can go and dive in and actually talk to people and see what's going on. But of course, with that kind of has its own set of problems as well. Something we get. I've even had it in the past where you'll have people who they'll write to you about something. It quite often tends to be, so we do a custom shop with G7th, and most of the time people want pretty normal things, but sometimes, of course, they want something a bit more risque. And you think, all right, I'm not sure we can really do that, So you'll nicely kind of say to them, well, sorry, we can't really put that. That's illegal in Holland. We can't put that on the capo, And there was one chap who did it a few years ago, and it was actually quite funny. He went to a lot of effort to do it, but he took it to his mate who was a jeweler. I think he was a watch engraver, and he got him to engrave it. And I won't say what it was because it was pretty obscene. And then he posted it and tagged us on it.
Oh,
we'd done it, and then I started getting all these messages, and I thought, oh blimey, this isn't ideal. And then he even created a fake email address to look similar to mine, and posted all of these screenshots between me, who was actually him, and him. And I just thought, I kind of admire the balls of someone who's got the time and goal to do that, but at the same time, really, like, you got nothing else to do, like guessing you're single. So yeah, it was a funny one. But yeah, so I think in terms of, I do jump in and out of the forums, and I do watch the odd gear video here and there. I watch a lot of Rick Beato. I think Rick's great. Rick has a few of our capos. He likes them. He's a busy guy, and I think he's a fascinating guy. And I watch a lot of Justin Hawkins rides again, that kind of stuff. And I say I'm not massively into gear. I mean, I have gear and I like it. And I think the newest thing I got the other day, I got a fuzz pedal, and I've never been a fuzz guy at all. But it comes in this cool little coffee bag, and I thought, oh, well, that's pretty cool.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm the same. I don't have much. I've never had much drive for a fuzz pedal. Yeah.
I'd never even used one, and I just thought, all right, well, Mikey's over there. It's like Redbeard Effects, and it's Mikey from Skin Dread, and I've gotten quite friendly with him over the years. And I thought, I'll go and try one. It can't be, I'll see what it's like. And it was called the Honey Badger, and I thought, oh, I like that. That's fun to say, and it was really cool. And I thought, oh, okay, all right, one of them then. And so it made me get all my pedals out and rewire the board, and I spent ages playing around with it. And that was from the UK show in Birmingham, and it was just good fun. And I think little things like that, if I'm not careful, I spend all day talking about guitars and doing lessons in the evenings, but not playing guitars. So I put a lot more effort in these days to think, no, okay, this hour's mine. I'm going to do this and turn the phone off or whatever. And so yeah, you have to really make time, I think, don't you? Because otherwise you just don't do it. Otherwise, from one year to the next, you won't touch that lovely PRS on your back wall there, will you? If you're not careful.
Yeah, no, it's easily done, especially when you're working in the industry. You then end up, you think, oh, I'm kind of in it, I'm doing it, and you forget about it because you're not tired. You have a good time, but you're lacking maybe some of that creativity that requires, especially writing songs. But yeah, I know that we've got similar kind of guitar histories, I think, Tommy, where you kind of play for 20 odd years and then you kind of maybe not plateau, but you kind of focus on other things. You may be writing songs, you may be digging into more of the content and working in the industry, and then the actual learning, the progression in the instrument becomes less of a focus in the day to day. So you just kind of forget about it and think, oh shit, and then you end up teaching people, and it's like, right, I'm teaching this person, and which is also good. I found when I started teaching it, it made me really learn and understand exactly what I was telling people, and in so many different ways, because you tell it to someone initially, and then they'd be like, they don't quite get it, or they do get it, and then both of those scenarios that go off in a tangent, and then you end up explaining it the same way to someone else, and then they don't get it in the same way someone else got it, and you're like, oh shit, I'm gonna have to explain it a different way. And then so you end up having 5 or 6 different ways to explain what the chromatic scale is, or major chords, minor chords, and you actually really start to understand it. So that's been an interesting progression that I didn't plan for, but it's like through teaching you just end up becoming more of an expert in everything to do with it, rather than just like, I can play this kind of thing, I play that. You can actually explain it to someone. So that's how I've been progressing the past few years, is just understanding it to the nth degree, because I have to explain it to people. But I'm also enjoying the exploration of gear and stuff, but I've never been someone that's really too focused on it. I found that once I'd bought like a PRS and the telly, and I had a Marshall for years and still have, and bought an Orange, and I recently bought like a Fender Deluxe Reverb, one of the new Tone Master things. But I'm really like, I'm picking it for a specific kind of thing, and I bought the Fender one mainly because it was like a clean, transparent amp, was quite light, wasn't overly expensive, didn't need maintenance. And it was just like for the reviews and the gear stuff that I do on the channel, that it was like, I need a kind of transparent, spanky, kind of clean thing to do pickup demos and all that sort of stuff. So it's been very intentional, rather than like being a bit of a gear whore where you especially go to forums and it's just people that don't really know what they're doing a lot of the time, haven't probably played the stuff, probably read a few reviews themselves and go in and have really opinionated things and put people down. That's the thing that I really don't like about that world. And I always try and be positive, and you get it even on the YouTube channels that I produce. You occasionally get someone that's like, no, this is wrong, it was actually this year it was made, and you're like, well, let's just calm down. Like, it's just meant to be a fun place to be, and everyone's encouraging each other, and that's been the rewarding bit for me recently, is just having students, having people that are asking questions through the YouTube and even an email, just to try and learn and get, I like sharing my knowledge and expertise and my experiences. It might not be always the perfect thing or what someone else thinks, but it's my opinion and my experience, and I think you come across that kind of way as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think I watched one the other day. I watched an Eric Johnson rig rundown, and I watch those every now and then. I think they're quite good fun, and I always like it when the actual artist does their own rig rundown. And I get it with some of the guys, like Carlos Santana didn't do his own one. Matey Boy, AC/DC didn't do their own one. Angus Young, but I watched Kerry King from Slayer do his own one. And I thought, well, he didn't have to do that, did he really? And it was actually really interesting, because I think with someone like that, I've been listening to Slayer for 20, 22, 23 years, and I hadn't watched this particular one for ages. And I listened back through it, and it's a similar kind of thing that I grew up playing, I suppose, really. And they're talking about bridges and the angle of your hand and distortion and all this. And I thought, yeah, actually, certain things like that, it's not that I'm not interested in any of it. I think when you tell someone you're not massively into gear, I think working in a music shop for a few years probably went a long way towards that. Like if I go in a music shop now, it's incredibly rare I'll pick anything up and play it, because I know I'm probably not going to buy it. And I know how irritating that is for the person behind the counter, because it is myself. And yeah, I think you get very used to what you like setup wise, don't you, as well? And I very rarely go into a shop and play something and I think, oh, this is just how I like it. And you can call it picky, but I think, well, you find what you like and stick with it, don't you? So I think, yeah, I do delve into certain areas, but yeah, like you say, some people get horrifically caught up in the minutiae. And I watched a really funny Eric Johnson one the other day. I love Eric Johnson. I've been a fan of him for years, and he was talking about all of his rig and all of his gear. And he got right to the end of it, and he flipped his Strat over and said, "I've actually taken the back plate off because I feel that the tiny little screws impact the sound just a little bit." And as he was saying it, he was being so serious, and I thought, I don't know if he's taking the piss or not, really. And he just stopped in the middle of a sentence, and he kind of looked at the camera and went, "You know what? You should probably just play." And I thought, yeah, because if it had been anybody else, like, I respect Eric Johnson massively, and he's a tremendous player, and I've seen him several times. And if it had been anybody else, I'd have thought, what are you on about? But it was him, and I thought, all right, I'll listen then, because it's like if Guthrie Govan's telling you something, well,
Yeah.
I should probably listen to this then, because it's Guthrie. But yeah, and he just got to the end of this, just play, guys. I wouldn't worry about it. Maybe it's just me, and I thought, all right, yeah, I feel a bit more human now. So there's a lot of good stuff out there, but yeah, I think the sheer volume of content, and people get so anal with gear, don't they? I went to this thing a few months ago here. It was called Guitar Geek Meetup, and there were about 50 of us, and I took a few guitars along. And there were people there who they were bringing in gear for 3 hours. They got there at 8 in the morning. It didn't start till about 1. And they were just loading stuff in, and they had amp after amp and pedal and after everything. And I just thought it was really cool that they did it, because everyone could try everything and everyone just played each other's gear. But there were quite a few guys there that brought all this gear along. I didn't hear them play it very much. Maybe they do. Nothing wrong with disliking gear. When you go to the harp guitar gathering as well, you've got people who they'll drive from New York to California so they can rent a big vehicle to take their 10 harp guitars over, because they want to show them to everyone. And maybe they don't play them that much, but who cares? They're enthusiasts. There's nothing wrong with liking stuff, is there? Nothing wrong with having, 30 watches if you like watches and you wear one of them. You can argue it's a bit of a waste, but it's not hurting anyone, is it? Keeps the industry going. But yeah, you do meet some of these interesting characters along the way, don't you? And yeah, I sort of make little mental notes of some of them as well, and think, I really hope I cross paths with you again, because this has been, well, it's been an experience. I don't know what it's been, but yeah, lots of characters in our world of guitars, definitely, aren't there?
Oh yeah, for sure. No, it's nice to see that people are passionate about it, and like you say, it keeps the industry going. But yeah, I think if people just remember to play the thing sometimes, rather than get too obsessed with, I don't know. I could go on and on with some of the misnomers and myths in the world of guitar, but we won't. It's not really in the scope of the conversation. But I think, what would you say? Because they've been around a long time. They're thought of like, just there for use when you need them, for like maybe changing key for a singer. Like, what's your kind of pitch on why a capo is so important, and what makes a good capo as well?
Yeah, in terms of why it's important, before I started working for G7th, I knew what I thought made why a capo was important, I think, but it really underlined it for me. And I think with capos, a lot of the time it's an afterthought. The first one I had was one of those wraparound jobs that's £1.99, and it frays and it breaks after you've used it 3 times. And I tried lots of different ones over the years, and of course you come across the same issues. They pull the strings out of tune. Some of them buzz, some of them don't. Some of them are pushed down too much, some of them aren't pushed enough. They're big and clunky sometimes. They weigh a lot, and you can't store them anywhere. And I think something that really kind of hit home to me when I was at uni and I was doing my final final dissertation. I can remember reading this book, and it was called "This Is Your Brain on Music." And it was really interesting, and it went off in lots of different directions. And there was this chapter, and it talked about musical contour. And when I read the word contour, I thought, I don't think I've ever seen that in a musical sense, other than sometimes an amp has contour rather than mid, doesn't it?
Yep.
And it just made me think back to, GCSE geography, looking at a map and the height of lines of hill. And I thought, where's this going, And one of the examples he gave was, if you hear happy birthday in C, your brain knows that it's happy birthday. But then if you hear it in D, your brain actually recognizes the difference and the distances between the intervals and the consistency. It doesn't think, I've never heard this before. It thinks, I've heard it, but something is a bit different, and so your brain stores musical contour. And I thought, oh, that's quite interesting. And I was talking to a friend of mine about it, and he just said, well, it's just getting a capo and put it on the second fret, isn't it? And it hadn't really occurred to me. And I think I still probably get 10 emails or comments a week of people just writing in saying, I don't really get why capos even exist. Just learn your chords. And I think, all right, fair enough. You ever tried barring a C shape at the ninth fret, have you? Or by all means, send me a video of you doing that, and we'll see how easy you find that.
Yeah.
Another one is, well, you just don't need to learn your bar chords. And I think, how quick can you put a capo on and take it off? So I think in terms of why to actually use it, changing key for singers and things like that, and also just keeping it interesting. If you're getting a bit tired of playing a tune in G, then stick the capo on the fourth fret and just see where it takes you. Because I think certain things will ring out in a bit of a different way depending on what the instrument is, and obviously if you're playing in something like a jazz band or a funk band, and you've got lots of horns and things like that in B flat and E flat, you'll be playing in some tricky keys. And fair enough, you can challenge yourself and try and bar all of these shapes. But what about when you're trying to use four fingers for a 13th flat 9 chord or something? You can't do it with your thumb, can you? So yeah, I think there are plenty of good reasons. It's easy to find, it's easy to be a bit sort of flippant about it, but I think also then you get into the world of things like partial capos as well, where you've got drop D, you can just capo the top 5 or the bottom 5. Dadgad capos, I mean, we don't do them, but things like the spider capo as well. There's lots of other types out there too, but yeah, and obviously then you get into the different models and the different styles. So you've got the cradle style capos, you've got the more squeeze style capos like we have there. Then you've got the flip lever capos, you've got the spring, which I think is probably what a lot of people think of when they originally think of one. And so in terms of what makes a good capo, I mean, the main thing being tuning, definitely. And that's why Nick came up with so you can see it on there, the ART, adaptive radius technology. Mm-hmm. So it adapt to your fretboard radius. You'll get, as little buzzing as humanly possible, and it will keep you in tune as much as humanly possible. So it just delivers even pressure across the fretboard. You can store it on the headstock of your guitar, you can store it behind the nut, and you can do it with one hand. And I think it's one of those things, the more people I've spoken to, guitar techs mainly actually, have really sort of emphasized this, how much all of this matters, because they're the guys who are putting the capos on for Keith Richards or whoever. And if they get it wrong, I mean, I don't know how many times you're allowed to get that wrong before Keith looks for a new tech, not necessarily him, but whoever, you're doing this for big artists. It needs to be right. And so I always like talking to these folks because it's interesting to me what they need. If it's a case of, right, we've got this one particular guitar. I spoke to a tech a little while ago, actually. She was teching for Brandy Carlisle, and she had a particular guitar. It was a combination of the width and the radius and the depth, and she just couldn't find anything that worked with it. So we sent a few things over, and thankfully we had to modify something a little bit, but it worked. And now, I get sent a link every time she uses it, and it's just, you'll probably never make another one of these again for whatever reason. But yeah, it's working. And it's just nice to think, oh yeah, we did that. We made that. We solved that problem. And then really it's a case of us trying to, break down these barriers, get people to think about why the capo is important. And fair enough, it's not a Les Paul or a Marshall. It's not the sexiest bit of kit you'll ever own, but it's still an important part of your rig, and you want it to work properly. You don't want it to be clunky or cumbersome, and you want it to do its job. So, if you need to do fast key changes, maybe the Nashville, which you can change position with very quickly. If you need to really clamp down heavy strings with a higher action, maybe the Newport, the flip lever, where you can really jam it down with that bit more force. And if it's a case of you don't need to move it very fast and you want that really classy kind of look, then something like the Heritage with the ornate engraving at the sides. And then this tends to be the most popular one in terms of the Performance 3. You can put down much pressure as you need, locks in place. You can, if you really wrenched it, you could rip it off, but really easy to apply. You can infinitely adjust the tension, keeps you in tune, and you can also put some custom shop engraving on there if you so desire. So have your favourite football team or your wife's name or whatever the case may be. Nothing obscene though, because it gets me in trouble. So,
no, it's interesting. I mean, I when you sent me these, I played with them, and I've always had a bit of a don't know, hate relationship with my capos, because there's more the tuning thing. Like, it's just always goes straight out of tune. And I noticed pretty much instantly when I put them on, all of them, in fact, were great at having that balance kind of and maintain the tuning. And, it's not so bad if it goes out of tune slightly across the board. The annoying thing is when, depending on the string tension, that tends to affect it, I find. But when you've got one goes out of tune different to the others because of where the tension is balanced across it, that's annoying, because I find if it's a general shift in pitch, singers can generally adapt to it and it's kind of a live feel. But if you've got that kind of, fluctuation between the strings, it's just a nightmare. But I was like, oh yeah, here we go, capos that solve the problem, and then put it on and was like, wow, actually this is like a simple solution to quite a, it's a big problem, I think, because it annoys the hell out of me when it's out of tune and you're sticking it on and you have to retune the strings and guitar, and it adds, a delay of like sometimes a couple of minutes to get your guitar in tune and stuff after that, or you have to have a tech that has a guitar. So although you talked about the big artists and stuff that get custom capos, like even for the people that are playing pubs and open mic nights and all that sort of stuff, even though it's more expensive than what you might be able to find a cheap capo for, these things last, they have lifetime guarantees, and I'm not pushing the product all, I review stuff and it's fantastic. It was just great to see. So like when you were, I know you weren't probably involved in the initial development of stuff coming a bit later to the company, but like what are the kind of differences that make that possible without you giving away, secrets and stuff? But
oh no, it's fine. I mean, yeah, the company started in 2004. And I know, obviously, with Nick, I mean, Nick's been playing guitar, I think, around about 60 years. So Nick Campling, he's kind of the Professor Frink behind the whole operation. And it's really fascinating talking to Nick about it, because I don't have an engineering background or mindset at all. And so sometimes I look at it as a guitar player. And after nearly 4 years at the company, I look at it as a guitar player who's got a lot of experience now of various problems that people have and need solving. And the first model was the performance original, so the performance one. So it's similar to this, didn't have ART in it. So it had a bit of a different string pad, and the clutch actually worked in the opposite direction. And then based on feedback, they went to the Performance 2. It was a bit slimmer, reversed the clutch, little grip on the top. And then the Performance 3 here, weight-wise and sort of chunkiness-wise, is somewhere in the middle. And I think Nick's idea, really, it was just a case of not being able to find anything that didn't get in the way of his hand and didn't look great, maybe, and didn't put it out of tune. And I think Nick, having the kind of brain that he has, something's always going on. There's always some cogs turning. And I think he told me that he just took a prototype to a show. I think it might have been Frankfurt, showed everybody. And, it's got that sort of sleek, a bit cyber kind of look to it as well. And then gradually from there, other models came along. So they wanted to do something to fill the, our equivalent of the spring capo. But a lot of time has been spent on things like, creating the right amount of tension so that it doesn't just jam the strings down with loads and loads of force and put you out of tune. Things like with the Newport, with the flip lever, having the adjustable thumb screw so you can add minimal tension, but you can also really crank it if you need to, if you use 13s or 14s.
mm-hmm.
And then with something like the Heritage, which came out in 2016, that was the first capo that had the adaptive radius technology in. So it was a case of, we wanted something to be at that price point, along with things like the Elliott and then, of course, the Page and stuff like that. But also with the addition of the adaptive radius technology in there, keeping it in tune. And then the 12-string version as well, with the compensated string pad with the teeth for the octave strings. And so as I look through the range now and I look through the company's history, I can see it a lot more why things have been done in that way. And so I'll look at you look at things like the tech spec, you've got something like the spring, you look on there and you think, oh, it's a spring. But the thousands of hours and the years that went into the research of that, right? How much tension does it need? And Nick's got these, I can't remember exactly the technical name for them, pressure pads, pressure blocks, where you can measure how much tension is actually being exerted from the capo. And it's amazing how accurate it is. You'll get 10 of the same one and they'll all be exactly the same. And it's different for each model, of course, depending on what it actually is and what job it needs to do. But it's really fascinating to me. And I think when people ask me these questions, I still come across things now after nearly 4 years that I'll need to check with Nick, because I'll say, all right, well, why is this like this? I think it's because of this. Oh, well, it's this reason, but it's also for that reason as well. And I think, oh, okay, so the material's slightly different. There was a lot of experimentation done with things like uh, with the teeth at the bottom here, so in terms of having, this slightly to the left or slightly to the right, depending on how it touches the neck, um, how pronounced the bumps are, I suppose, really, for want of another way of putting it. Because obviously, when you clamp this down, it's a case of it needs to remain firm on the back of the neck, but of course, the silicone rubber it's inert, so it won't damage and it won't dent it or anything like that. So, all of these things, there's been so much time and detail put into all of this stuff. And it's very easy, isn't it, to look at it and think, oh, it's just a capo. But it really makes me appreciate how much time and blood, sweat, and tears has actually gone into the brain power behind these things. And I always wonder what's next in Nick's head, and I don't know necessarily what it is always. But every now and then he'll call me or he'll show me something and say, "What do you reckon to this?" All right, and he'll say, try and break this. I'll take it for a week. And generally I can't. And if I can, he wants to know, all right, so why did that break? Can I improve this? Can I do this? And he'll go away and then he'll come back another week later and he'll have changed it and then it won't break that time. And I won't necessarily know what he's done at first. Then he'll take them both apart and he'll show me and I'll think, oh, okay, right, I can see what you've done there. Even to a layman like me who doesn't get the engineering stuff past a very basic point. So it's really fascinating. And again, none of it's a secret particularly. We have all of the infographics on the YouTube channel, so you can see how they all work. You can see how the clutch operates. You can see all the different parts, how it locks in place. It's fascinating stuff, and you get some very hardcore fans of it as well, users. I probably get sent one or two things a month of people using them for things. Like there was a guy a few years ago in France, and he sent me a picture, and he had his capo in his hand with some medical gauze underneath it and on top of it, and I thought, what's he been doing? And he said, oh, I was peeling an avocado and I accidentally stuck the knife through my hand. I thought, that's one way to kill some time before the grave, I suppose, isn't it? And he said, yeah, but because of the way the capo locks, I was able to get the gauze and just lock it on there. And until I got to the hospital, and I thought, oh, fair enough. And so a couple of days later, he sent me another picture of him and the doctor, and they both had capos. The doctor's a guitar player as well, and they both had the same one. And I thought, I really want to use that picture, but if I do, it's the trouble, isn't it? It's kind of like every now and then you'll get someone who'll say, do you do a one-string capo? And you think, no, we don't, sorry. And then 10 minutes later, they'll have taken a bandsaw to it, and they'll send you a picture and say, well, you do now. You say, you voice authority on that. And so I kind of want to post pictures of it because I think it's quite nifty that people have done it. But at the same time, I think people having all their limbs is possibly more important than doing that. And you don't want to encourage these things past a certain point, do you really? I don't know how steady people's hands are. So, yeah, it's always an interesting one. But and I never quite know what's going to be waiting in the inbox for me the next morning. But you'll get people who I had one of our texts a little while ago. They were in a hotel. He texts for Rick Astley's guitar player, and the heating broke in the hotel. And so he sent me a picture of one of these on a hairdryer thing, and it was just pressing it down like that. Heat in the room, and I thought, oh, I like that. That's quite inventive. That's good. Or a bag of crisps or something, or popcorn. You can just lock it on the top. But I'm not sure we'll bring that into the marketing specifically. But it's nice to know that it works.
It's a bit niche, isn't it? A bit of a niche audience.
Yeah, it's Marmite on an oyster, isn't it? I think so.
Much, yeah.
We'll leave it at that, I think. But yeah, these people are out there.
So you were a guitar, instructor and stuff, Tommy, before you kind of got into the capo world. Like, do you have any, tips, tricks, or general thing that people should keep in mind when they're learning? I'll just try and pull that out of every person we have on the show.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of learning, I think something that I found really, really useful was playing with as many people who were further down the line than me. And I think that really helped me to keep, I don't think I'm a particularly egotistical person. I'd hope not anyway, but I think it really helped me to keep that in check from day one, And I think, and of course, when you first start, everyone's better than you, aren't they? And so I used to go along to sound check of bands that we were playing with or bands that were playing at the local pub, and I'd watch and I'd sort of make mental notes and think, okay, right, what's he doing there? I'll ask him about that. He can only tell me where to go. I think another thing, obvious though it might sound, and I think a lot of people get told this or say it, but maybe don't always adhere to it, is, don't be an arsehole. Because I think with so much of this stuff, it's a competitive world, isn't it? Let's be honest, it's very competitive. And I think a lot of the time, a friend of mine, he used to work with a guy called Martin Atkins, who's the drummer for Public Image Limited, and he wrote a book called Tour Smart years ago. He came into uni, and it was great. And it was one of those things where he was talking all about all of his, experiences of touring and things to do and things not to do. And something that really, really helped me was getting a bit of perspective on that, about how important being, it's fine if you can play your sweet pitch arpeggios at 240 beats a minute, but can you also speak a bit of Portuguese if you're on tour in Portugal, or can you fix the van if it breaks down, And I remember thinking, actually, yeah, there's a lot more to it than just the playing. And I think I don't do as much theatre playing these days now, but I did a theatre show recently, We Will Rock You, and the other guitar player, she was 15, and she was great. She's working on her grade 6 at the moment, and it was the first one that she'd done. And it took me back in time to 20 years ago when I did my first one. And, there were little things like always keeping a couple of spare picks, or having a tuner that, while that you don't have to jam your foot on the pedal really hard to get it to play, or having a spare guitar, or having a tuner on your phone as a backup, or all of these things, And it was nice to just pass a few things on. And she was so receptive to everything. She was great. We worked through lots of lines together. And with it being We'll Rock You, there's some really demon 2-guitar stuff in there as well. So we spent quite a bit of time going through parts, and it was really good fun. And I think, it's just, being a very open-minded and willing to learn. Every day's a school day, cliche as it sounds. And just being willing to help as well. I think, helping other bands get gear off the stage. It's not just learning your instrument, it's learning how to be a good band member, isn't it? And how to be a good person to be on the bill if you're playing solo. Always thanking the sound person, not making their life harder, and not being rude to the catering people if you're lucky enough to have them, all that kind of stuff. So I think I didn't think that wide at all to begin with, because arguably you don't need to when you first start. You maybe don't have those things, but gradually as you move through stuff, I think it's just have a business card, give one to everyone, and make sure you email them and stay in touch. And I think when I was at uni, one of my lecturers said in the very first day, it was just always be the first person to get here and be the last one to leave, because we remember that. And I always did that. And I was a bit older anyway. I was 22 when I went. So I was there because I wanted to be. I wasn't doing it there so I could go and get pissed 8 nights a week, And I ended up working there for 6 years afterwards. And I know that went towards some of it, because, you show that genuine interest and you think, well, I want to learn how to do what you do. And you know more about it than me because you're doing it and I'm not. So, if your goal is to get rich, well, you don't speak to people who aren't rich, and, you speak to people who are, I suppose, don't you? And, no one's better or less valid or anything, but if you want to work towards this thing, you need to ask people who've got it, don't you? And who've actually done it. And I think in music, especially guitar players, I think we're terrible for this. Not all of us, but a lot of us. It's very easy to talk a big game, isn't it? And just, oh, well, I've done this to this. Have you? Well, yeah, I should be doing it pretty soon. So you haven't done it. Well, I'm thinking about learning, and you think, okay, what was the question again? There's a lot of that, I think. And I quite like it when I come across it, because it's an interesting one. And again, like with my offspring being 15 now, they kind of live in that world where all their mates are like that. But that's why I always make sure they've come to sound check to gigs and stuff with me, and they'll take pictures and they'll watch bands. And so all their mates are talking about what they're going to do. They get to come and watch stuff from the side of the stage. No, you're actually going to do this. You're not just going to go to school and talk about what you're going to do to your mates. Here's a real life thing without a screen. You've got to be present. You've got to be in the moment. And, if you want to do photos or do journalism, which is what they're interested in, well, here it is. Don't just watch stuff on TikTok about it. That's fine to learn a bit about it, I guess. But here's an actual real life thing. Go and talk to these people, and don't be an arsehole while you're at it as well. Be nice. So I think it all plays a big part.
Wise words. Don't be an arsehole. Yeah, I think it's good to be nice, and good, not even nice, but kind. Like, it's just, it pays dividends to do that, and not to get something out of someone. Never see it as like a balance sheet that someone owes you something. It's just, if you put that out into the world and into the music industry, you'll be known as that kind of person, and people will just want to help you buy product of just being that kind of person to people. And it's interesting you talked about the kind of getting out there and doing things in the real world for people that are, starting guitar now and whatever. And I'll often say it to my students, and it's the scariest thing I did in music, I think, which is the first performance gig concert I ever did. And the
Oh, yeah.
fact that you don't have to do that now to generate an audience. And it's a very interesting time that we live in. And what were your kind of memories of that first, step out onto the stage, and what was going through your head at that point?
I can remember the first public performance I ever did. Well, it wasn't on guitar, but I can remember I was 7 and I played a piece that I think I did it for my grade 1 piano, and it was called Itchy Fingers. I've still got it
Okay.
somewhere. And I can remember I had a little waistcoat on and other clothes as well. And I can remember it was upstairs at this church that my mum played the piano. And I can just remember going up and sitting down, and I'd practiced just excessively, infinitely. And I don't really even remember how the performance side of it went, but I do remember everyone clapping. And then I
Hmm.
started walking off the stage, and I started walking quickly, and my mum and dad kind of went, no, 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 bow. And then I did a little bow and then walked off. And I don't remember much else other than just thinking, wow, I've learned how to do a thing, and I've done this thing in front of other people, and I thought it was all right. It was an incredible feeling. And I think guitar wise, gig wise, the first public gig I ever did, I can remember very clearly. That would have been just before Christmas in 2001, and I can remember all my mates were at the front from school because we played in the school hall, and it was one of those things where I was nervous, but at the same time, I think I just thought, well, I can at least pretend I'm not nervous, and I well, I'm the only guitarist on the stage, and so there's no one to compare me to. We're first on, so they haven't heard anything good yet. So by default, I'll be the best guitar player they've heard at this point. Anyway, I think I played that little mind game with myself.
Yep.
I've still got a video of it somewhere. I don't know where it is now. So yeah, it was terrifying, but it was a very Moorish feeling as well. And I think every now and then, you might well have experienced this as well. But I think, depending on what you do, something I've found, I've been very fortunate to do some somewhat higher level stuff, and then a lot that isn't. And of course, you get the accidental amazing gig sometimes, don't you? And you just think, oh, that's fantastic. And the next one's not as good, or it's not quite what it was. You're not opening up for this person anymore. And so you have to really savor those, don't you? And I think that kept me in check as well. I can remember doing an opening slot for Cara Dillon, locally, who did at the time she'd just done the theme song for the Tinkerbell film.
Hmm.
I remember thinking, well, I've not done anything for Disney. That's pretty big time, because I think most people have heard of Disney, haven't they? And I was so nervous about it. And the best thing was, only 3 people were there for me. So no one had to pretend they liked it. And that's really the best audience to play to, isn't it? I think it's pretty terrifying. But at the same time, if all of your mates clap you, that's one thing. But if a room full of complete strangers clap you, you're onto something, I think. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, they'll fair enough. They might just be being nice, but not all of them will be being nice. Is how I've come to realize with it, I think. And so yeah, those initial gigs early on were very nerve wracking, but I think I also had so much excitement there as well that I didn't care about it that much. And I think being when we first started playing the pub circuit, we were like between 13 and 15. That seems a bit weird to think now. Probably couldn't even go into a pub now, could you, at that age? And they weren't bothered about checking ID or any of that stuff, were they, back then? Um,
No.
so yeah, it was just really good fun. And I can remember the first gig that we ever did. So with the metal band that I play in, we're called Smokescreen. The first gig we ever did, that would have been early 2022, early 2002 rather. And my brother was 13, and one of the guys from his school was really, really short, and he came along, and the pub just went, "Oh, you're not coming in. It's not a youth club." And his dad came along and said, "Well, he's the same age as all the rest of them." And we all looked older, but we weren't. And then it was a case of, well, you told us you were 16. No, we didn't. We just didn't tell you how old we weren't. And then eventually it came down to a case of, well, look, there's 100 of us here. Do you want to sort of come in and drink Coke all night, or do you want to have an empty pub? And they chose not to have an empty pub, and they didn't mind as much after that. And there just wasn't any issue with it. There wasn't any trouble. And I think that was a big learning curve as well. Trying to even get gigs at all. I mean, around here now, the venues we used to play, there were 3 or 4. They've all gone now, unfortunately.
Mm.
A few places still put gigs on, but every time I go to a local gig, there's very rarely anyone there. but but by the same token, I don't go to very many local gigs, so I can't really complain. There's nowhere to play because if I'm not going to them anyway, in that sense, I'm not helping, am I? So so it's a very different kind of playing field now. But like you said earlier on, you can, with all the digital gigs and the streaming gigs and that kind of thing, maybe people don't get as nervous doing that. But I don't know if you maybe get the same feeling from it either. If you're feeding off the energy of people actually being there, that's very different to doing a gig like I'm talking to you now, isn't it?
Yeah, in no way is it the same. Like, it's just, I mean, I used to do periods of live streaming on TikTok and haven't done that for a little bit, and did it on Facebook a few times, and it's great, good fun, but you see comments pop up and whatever, but there's no kind of feedback with the crowd, there's no kind of instant reaction, there's no kind of eye contact, it's all that stuff that you kind of take for granted, and you're not there, with the other bands on the bill and creating a night of music. It's completely different. I don't know. I didn't like it as much. I mean, it's fine to consume YouTube videos, and I like watching gigs on YouTube and stuff. It's convenient, but I will generally watch a live performance because the attitude of the performer is different. They're just more excited about the whole thing. There's the whole, the way they're doing it is completely different, I find, in that kind of live recording sense. And yeah, I think it's interesting that people are consuming that way, and that was what it was like in the pandemic and stuff. But I don't know. I think live performance is the best way to hear music. Sometimes I hear bands live from the recording and they're not as good as the recording, and I think that's mainly because of the world. We won't go into it, but the world of over processing and over manipulating the way things sound in the studio, so that when people play live, it doesn't sound anything like them anymore. So it's an interesting world.
Definitely. Yeah, a lot of truth in that.
So what's going on with G7? You guys are pretty active on social media and do videos and fun things. Like, what are the kind of thoughts and things you've been doing in that side of things?
Yeah, so social media wise, I mean, we have all the regular channels that you'd expect. So yeah, we've got TikTok for our sins. We've got Instagram, Facebook. We do a bit more on LinkedIn now as well. And then we have Twitter. We don't do tons with Twitter. Twitter's kind of playground of the idiot, isn't it, really, in the nicest way possible?
My thoughts, yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. And for that reason, I like to go on it sometimes. But yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one. So now and again, we'll post on there. But when Instagram disabled repost, I think it was about 2 years ago, I used to use that all the time. It was a really handy function because for us, if we want to put up some content on a Monday morning, we've really got two choices. The way I look at it, we can either go into HQ and film one of us playing something with a capo, or we can take one of the people who have already gone out and bought the capo with their hard-earned money, and they're already doing something, and we can get them in front of people who already follow our page. And I'm always very hesitant to use the word exposure for obvious reasons, because I'm sure you've been paid an exposure many times as I have done. It's not fun. It's hard to sort of like pay for your diesel with exposure, isn't it? As we know. But the way that I always think of it is just, well, we're fortunate to have, the tribe, if you like. That's how we think of them, of people that follow what we do. And if there's anyone out there using one of our capos, obviously there are a lot, and we can't, there isn't enough time every day to speak to every person. But if someone's gone to the trouble of filming a video and some audio and they're using one, well, we'd like to know about it, because it's always nice to see what people are doing. And so we'll do, we've got a different hashtag for each day. So we'll have one for a different model. So we'll do a heritage on a Monday. On a Tuesday, we'll do a trade focus post, and we'll do things collaboratively so that it spills onto both pages and adds all of the likes and the views together. And just about every shop has an Instagram page now. And it's very easy to just overlook that, I find. So if people weren't stocking our capos all over the world, they wouldn't be selling them. And it's our way of trying to, make that bond a bit stronger between us and the retailers, and say thank you. Here's this great place in Milan. They sell our capos. Go and check them out if you want one. You can buy them online as well. But if you want to go to a bricks and mortar store, go and try one first. This is a place that sells them, And so on a Wednesday, we'll do the performance. On a Thursday, we've just started doing a thank you Thursday, so a testimonial, which is nice because people do write in and they're grateful when you get things sorted, and it seems a shame not to showcase some of that as well. We do the Newport on a Friday, and then the Nashville on Saturday. And I just started doing one this Sunday. I've called it Crafty Sundays. And the only reason for that is my better half came up with it actually the other day. And because we work with a lot of luthiers, we'll do engraved capos for them. And if people weren't building the guitars, well, wouldn't need capos anyway. So it's just our way of saying, right, you're looking at a new guitar, or have you tried one of these? This person's fantastic. They're based here. Here's a video of them having one of their guitars played. Here are the capos we did for them. It's another way of us, thanking them and highlighting what they do. And we'll do different series as well. So if we've got NAMM coming up, or if we've got a new model coming up, or if we've got a launch, a giveaway, that kind of thing, we'll put a bit more focus on a particular thing. We did International Women's Day the week before last, which was great. So we did five 10-layered posts. And I always do the same thing every year with International Women's Day. I try so hard to include as many different people as we can, because the reality is we work with thousands of artists.
Mm.
We can't, I'd be spamming everyone all day. We'd have hundreds of people unfollow us. And the same thing always happens. I always say, please don't be offended if you're not in this post. It's not that we don't think you're wonderful. We've just got so many people to try and cover. And inevitably what happens is you post all 50 of them on the 5 posts, and then 20 or 30 players come on and say, oh, great to see you made the list, kind of thing. We loved you. And I thought, oh, didn't put them in. And it's never a case of people making a point. We appreciate everybody, but we do things like an Artist of the Week post on a Friday. So that allows us to put a bit more focus on a particular artist. Maybe if they've got a tour coming up, they've got a release coming up, or if they do something a bit different, if they're using partial capos, if they're using a 12-string, anything like that, really. If they've got a charity concert coming up that we're affiliated with, we work with Hope for Justice in human slavery and trafficking. We're very passionate about that. So we've done live gigs with them as well. Something that's been interesting for me as well is the different platforms and the different hat you have to wear. So obviously with something like TikTok, it's pretty different to LinkedIn. Not necessarily posting the same content on both of them. And so trying to find what works on each one, what gets a good level of engagement, what people like, what people don't like. We do a lot more trade related stuff on LinkedIn, not as much on TikTok, because it doesn't tend to be the audience for it. Sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised, so it's, I like to do these series, put a focus on maybe a different part of the world, different demographic, different genre, different models, all that kind of thing. And it's a task without end, really, because, however many times you post about any one thing, there's always another 99 to think about the next day. And, try and think what to do next, really, that people might like or find interesting, and incorporate as many people as possible, make it engaging rather than just banging out 10 posts a day just because we've got 10 posts a day.
Yeah, it's tough to keep up with it and keep churning out content and keep coming up with ideas and doing that. But it's
definitely
great that you facilitate and promote people that are actually helping promote your products. But it's just actually giving them a nod, and it makes them feel great and helps you. If you've got one of these capos or you buy one, then make sure you go and find out the relevant hashtag and tag the account, and I'm sure they'll give you a share. So
it's always nice, whatever level somebody is. It's we're very fortunate to work with some very high level artists, but at the same time, no one's born a high level artist. Everybody starts off not knowing anything at all, and you never know who someone's going to become. And so everyone deserves some time, because everyone's valid. And I think anyone who goes out and buys one of the capos, at the very least, I'm going to look at your video and double tap it and like it, because I think, oh, great, nice one, and you see people who are 10 or 11 using the capos, and people who are 70 or 80. And I just think, well, yeah, we just want to include it. And in all of the paperwork that we have within the packaging, it's always, thanks for joining the G7th family. And that's what we think of it as. It's just a case of you're using one. If you've got a problem, give us an email about a capo, that is. Probably can't help with much else. But agony aunt, Tommy. But the pub with no beer. But yeah, it's nice to see what people are up to, and it gives me ideas as well. Makes me think, well, somebody's came up with an idea earlier on of they're going to do sort of a takeover for a week on the Instagram in a few months' time, and they're going to come up with a song on the day and show it in the various sort of phases of the process as they're writing it, and they'll do one with a capo on one fret on a Monday, different one on the Tuesday, that kind of thing. And I haven't seen anybody do that particularly recently, anyway, that I know of in the capo world. So we'll do that, see what happens, see how it goes, and yeah, it's just a bit of a different angle. And whenever we do things like a partial capo week, I know the 30 or 40 people that frequently post with them, I always end up with 9 or 10 new ones. People that I just didn't know had them. And people will then start tagging us and then start following us. I add them to my artist spreadsheet, and I just think, oh, that was really good. It casts the net a little bit wider. And then the next time I've got a bit more choice in terms of what I can post. It's more people we can interact with. It's nice. It's fun. It builds the community.
Like, I'm not going to ask you to name your favorite artists you work with, and that you've got lots and lots and lots that you do. But are there like one or two that have come to you with like problems, or that stick out prominently that you've fixed and resolved that really stand out, like with the products that you make?
Funnily enough, earlier on, when you were talking about how you were a bit, oh yeah, this capo solves all the problems, does it? Yeah, of course it does. The last one did. So one of our artists over in America, his name's Izzy, he plays guitar for Seal.
Mm-hmm.
As a lot of people from my kind of era, my introduction to Seal was Space Jam, probably 25 years ago, when he did Fly Like an Eagle. And when he mentioned that he played for Seal, I thought, oh, blimey, I've played Kiss from a Rose at more weddings than I care to remember. And I thought, blimey, that's cool. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. So we did these capos for Seal. Didn't hear anything more for a year because Izzy didn't see him. And then all of a sudden, I get a message from Seal via the G7th Instagram from his account. He runs it himself. And he just said, really, really appreciate this, guys. I honestly didn't know in 40 odd years of guitar playing, I thought capos just did that. I didn't know there was a way around it. And he said, but I put the capo on and I played an A and it sounded like an A for the first time. So thank you. And then, I speak to him here and there. He's a busy guy, but he's very gracious. And yeah, it was just lovely to hear that we'd solved the problem. I'd be just as happy if I'd solved it for my next door neighbor. But when you get someone who's been doing it for 40 years, they've been a prominent name for a long time, you remember them from your childhood. He was on Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Saturday Night Live, all of these within the last handful of months, using his capo on there. And you just think, he doesn't have to use that if he doesn't want. That solved the problem for him. So that was really lovely. It was nice to solve that issue for Brandy Carlisle that she was having on one of her guitars. And there are so many people that, I could mention that I'm fortunate that we work with, but someone very recently, in particular, is a chap called Jim Chemo West. He plays guitar for Weird Al Yankovic. And we went to see them at the London Palladium last month, got to meet Al afterwards as well, and got to meet up with Jim, which was amazing because, I've been listening to Weird Al since I was about 14. And they've had the same band, I think, for 42, 43 years now.
Yep.
Which is longer than I've even been alive, which is amazing to even think about, really. So it was lovely to meet Jim. He's a very, very respected guitar player. And none of them put a foot wrong the whole night. It was a solid 2-hour show. And it was just amazing. It was just 4 guys. It was a stripped back set. It was incredible. And just such nice, unaffected people, like people who've been doing this stuff at this level for this long. A part of you thinks before you meet them, all right, they might not be very impressed at having to meet people. They might not be this, they might not be that. It just wasn't any of it at all. It was just really nice. And it's the whole thing, isn't it, of don't meet your heroes. And I've met a few that haven't been as great as I hoped they'd be, but then again, maybe I met them on the wrong night. So yeah, it's lovely to be able to help people out with these things. And there are still artists I'd like to get stuff to that on a personal level would be really cool. But again, some people don't use them. Some people do use them, and some people use them very sparingly. We did some for Muse the other day, which was really cool. They're not massive public capo users, but they have them in the studio here and there. I'd rather they have them and use them when they need them, even if we never see them publicly. It's nice to know they're using them, and what more can we ask for, really?
The capo is just one of those things that if you need it, you need it. And if it's not there and it doesn't work, then it's annoying, and then you have to retune. And yeah, it's interesting you get feedback from people that are surprised even after decades of thinking that was the way things always had to be. So no, it's great. It must be quite rewarding. And then from that, kind of like what's next for G7th? What have you got in the pipeline? Because you've got a lot of products already, but sounds like Nick's always innovating. So
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Um, well, as people will know, we're recording this somewhat before it's going out, so I can talk about these, which I've been really hoping that I could do. So we'll have done now by the time this goes out. But the 14th of April, now we'll see us launch some new colours in the Nashville Spring range. So we've already got black, silver, and gold. We're actually discontinuing the gold, and we're bringing in green, white, red, and blue. And it's one of those things, really, in terms of different colours. Every time you go to a show, people always ask you the same thing. It's just, oh, how's it going? Yeah, nice to see you. What's new then? And people always want to know, and it's a fair question, really. But I suppose at the same time, how many new things do you need to do, and can you realistically do with something like paper? It's
yeah,
one of those things. It's never a case of everything's been solved, definitely. But in terms of different colours and things like that, people have different coloured guitars. They have different hardware. They'll have different settings. They'll have different themes. Like we always have. We've had quite a few people paint their capos green for St. Patrick's Day, things like that. Where people put diamonds all over them, and stuff like that. And you get people make them red, white, and blue if they're doing something on, Independence Day or something like that. I've seen all that kind of thing before. So we've got some new colours in the Nashville range, and also we've got the P3 Classical. So this is the classical and flamenco is how it's marketed, if you like, but it will also work on wider neck guitars. So we've got a few 7-string players using them, 8-string players using them. There's even one person who's using it on a 9-string. It just works on a 9-string. This particular 9-string anyway, and that's got the ART in there as well, so it will adapt to the radius. And it's really nice to have that option, because every now and then you'll get someone who will have a wider neck guitar and they want to play up at the 7th fret maybe, and the P3 is just a millimeter too short for that. It's not very often, but it does happen. You can't have I get people email almost every week saying, do you have one capo that will do all of my guitars? Well, it depends what all your guitars are, really. I mean, if they're all within this length, then yeah, probably. But then, of course, it's just a case of, well, some of them are this deep, some of them are this shallow, this wide, this narrow. So it's not often that something will work for absolutely everything. But I'm really excited to have just that extra little bit of top bar on there, because it will just work for people who want to have that radius classical. We find more and more now you get a lot of classical guitars with a radius or crossover nylon guitars, and the flatter ones just don't work as well. So it's really nice to just be able to offer something to those folks. And it's surprising how many people in the classical and flamenco world actually use them. It's maybe not something that would jump to everyone's mind, but I see hundreds every day, so I know they're out there. And in terms of the wide neck things as well, fair enough, not every 7-string or 8-string player will want to use them, but if they do want to use one, we've got them one that will do the job for them. So that's how we come at it from, really. So yeah, looking forward to both of those gradually getting out, and obviously as the press releases go out and as the videos go out, with NAMM, we always have videos on the booth as well, not with any audio, just with some nice video. So we've got some people that haven't been to NAMM before, who haven't been as exposed to a US audience before. It's our way of giving back something to them as well. So and I think now, so many people have. Something I noticed with content as well when COVID struck was everybody was at this level when they started doing it, and then very quickly the level started to get really, really good because it had to stand out.
Yeah.
Even I dabbled in a bit of audio and video throughout COVID, and I'd never had any clue about any of that. And I was amazed how quick it was actually to get something put together. And obviously you've got to polish it after that. But it was really nice, and it keeps your brain active, learning a new skill. And of course now everyone has got a pretty good handle on that, I think. So yeah, it's an exciting time with a couple of new things, and I'm just looking forward to seeing it all appear on social media. Start to see the new colours appear and see what people do with them.
That's exciting that you're still innovative and actually making the decent products and trying to, you're right. People want to know what's new, what's going on, what's happening. And you go, well, we've got the capo, it works, it's great. Like we've spent thousands of hours making this thing. Like, okay, but you're right. Like when you get these enthusiasts and stuff, like different colors is people love that stuff. So good for you. So yeah, I mean, while we're at this point in the video, I think if you wanted, we're going to give away. So there's the Nashville Capo, the Newport one, and the Performance 3. So there'll be a link in the description on YouTube for you to enter the competition to win those, and we'll mail them out to you. I haven't decided if I'm going to give away all 3 to one person or 1 to one person. I don't know. What do you think, Tommy?
Maybe share the love, Dan. Maybe
that's what I was thinking. I think I'm not going to say which one you'll get, but they're all good and all are quite versatile for whatever kind of guitar you have within reason. So unless you've got something quirky and special like Tommy did, but it's free, so you can get on and get those sent to you. So Tommy, it's been great to chat with you, like just to dig into your own history and just find out a bit more about capos in general and who you've been working with. And it's pretty exciting for you at the moment, it seems, with NAMM and the shows and getting some new products out there. So thanks for the time to come and chat with us. It's been great.
Thanks for having me, mate. It's been really nice to meet you, and I'm loving what you're doing with the show. Thank you for having me, and really appreciate your time. Hope to meet you in person at some point.
Absolutely. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching the show, and make sure to go check out G7th and their various social media platforms that they're on, website, etc. And go try some out. And if you do want to enter the competition, go into the link in the description below. And good luck. Yeah. Thanks, everyone, and I will see you next time. Thanks, Tommy.
Cheers.